must be cautious.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome back to Aggressive Negotiations, your Star Wars podcast, here on the Nerd Party Network that is a little slice of Star Wars heaven in a galaxy oh so large as we explore every nook and cranny, and this week, journey back to Kashyyyk. I am Jedi Master John Mills, and joining me once more for a deep dive journey into a Bad Batch Season 2 episode is revered Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you ready to get a little Clone Wars with it this week?
I am. And can you just pass a little bit more of that Wookiee nog? Because that's really why I'm here.
Well, Wookiee nog is great to drink and to peel paint off of your car, but it's also extremely useful for keeping those spiders away because I got to tell you, not a big fan of those things. Of course, what I am a fan of is people leaving us star ratings and reviews over on Apple Podcasts. If this is the first time you've ever heard us ask for these reviews, well, welcome to the show, because I think this might be your first one. For everybody else, if you haven't written us a rating and review, come on. What did it hurt you? Come on. Give us a rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. You, of course, can also interact with us online at the Jedi Masters on Twitter and thenerdparty.com/contact on your web browser. Also accessible not just from desktop, but from your mobile device. So, Matt, we are here, and we're getting deeper into Season 2, and we've had, some serious stuff going on. We've had a bit of a breather with Fee, and now we have what I would say is another self-contained episode, sort of a bridge story, a world-building story, as we go with Tribe. And we run across a Wookiee Jedi as the Batch is conducting a deal for fake identity chips that the robot mafia apparently is involved in. Shout out to other Futurama fans that enjoy that. And I just wanted to get your feeling just right off the bat from you. With this episode, do you think that it's a bridge too far to bring back a character from the Clone Wars, like Gungi, or do you think that this is the right type of character to bring back from the Clone Wars?
I mean, I love that we bring back this character personally. I think that it's incredibly smart. If we're going to run into a Jedi on the run, I think, you could say it's small universe or everything, but I think the thing that makes it great and helpful, when you're doing a show where you've got 2 minutes or whatever to tell the story, it is helpful to be able to use as much shorthand as you can. And so when you have this character, I think it's smart to use. The other thing I think that this does, though, is that, if you're coming into the Bad Batch and, this is your first time to watch the animated series, or maybe you're a kid and this is your first introduction, this character showing up, if the way they talk about this character and Gungi and everything, it's like, then you could be like, oh, maybe this character is in other things, So I think it's kind of the perfect way to honor what came in the past, of course, give fans that moment of seeing that character again. I think every fan, is always kind of wondering, as we get into this time period, who survived, right? Who made it? This answers one of those questions about a character that I think a lot of people gravitated towards. Who doesn't love Wookiees? And so all of it is really well done. And I remember watching this episode the first time, and all of those feelings kind of came back as I was watching the episode again, that I just kind of jumped out of my seat, being excited for the fact that this character was back. And so did you feel that way? Were you glad that they had brought Gungi back, or did you feel as though, it was a step too far.
No, I think I very squarely fall into the same camp that you do. In fact, I would say that Gungi is obscure enough, quote unquote, in the sense that you and I, or anybody watching the Clone Wars, we see Gungi, and I mean, for me, I wasn't sure. I was like, Gungi. Like, it took me a minute. I was like, oh, geez, where? Okay, I know the name. It's not like the type of character where I would assign any small world thinking. Small world thinking to me is they run across Kanan.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or you bring in Obi-Wan at this early stage. And It's like, oh, right, I served with Anakin's cut. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, this is the right way to get back into the idea that the Jedi didn't all disappear at the end.
Right.
Additionally, I think that Gungi is an incredibly appropriate character because of the way they relate him to Omega. Specifically, they call out that Omega didn't have a real childhood, and then it casts into stark relief that neither did the Padawans.
Yeah.
And maybe that was a failing of the Jedi as well, is that it didn't let these people fully be people when they were children, right? There's something to be said about that. We talked about that with Luke's upbringing versus Anakin's upbringing. Luke is raised in basically a family instead of a didactic order that, is dogmatic as well, according to some. But I think that my question, though, would be, is it too convenient they run across Gungi? Is it something where this organically grows in, or do you think that this should have been a two-parter that evolved into everything? Like, basically, is there too much for 22 minutes in here? Should this have been 2 episodes, or is 1 episode enough?
I thought that it felt pretty organic, and one of the things that jumped out at me as I was watching it this time is the way in which this lets you know that the people that Sid are working with and the people that they're going on these missions for aren't great people. And I think it's a very subtle thing, and you have to be thinking about it. But to see that these are the type of the people that they're going on these missions for on the behest of Sid, it's like, well, yeah, this is a bad look when they're trading in, human trafficking, or not human trafficking, but you know what I mean.
It's essentially that.
And so I think that that's the thing that really works for me about this episode, and why the connection there, I think, works, and why I don't think it's too much. And I think, the beauty is that it also builds upon things that we saw in the Clone Wars, where, the fight between the Trandoshans and the Wookiees, their hatred for one another, and, the Trandoshans using the Empire as their ability to go after, the Wookiees. So to me, it's like everything about this episode works together really well, so that I don't feel like anything is really out of left field in that. And would I have loved maybe for it to be a 2-parter, just because spending time on Kashyyyk with Gungi and the Wookiees was awesome, which it was. That's the only reason. I think this episode just leaves me wanting more of those characters and in that place, more so than me feeling like the story needed it.
Well, where I would have wanted it to breathe, and this is not a knock on the episode, but it more speaks to the world building aspect of it, is we encounter Trandoshans. We already know they're scumbags. Obviously, you can't say every Trando, the ones we encounter who do these terrible things. Yeah. We've encountered Trandoshans in this line of work before.
Sure.
So
the fact that we've only met scumbag Trandoshans, it speaks to that, but,
I think Bosk is probably the best of the bunch so far, which is saying
this is
something.
True. It's true.
It's a statement, but it is.
It's a statement,
but it's also one of those things where the Empire, this clearly establishes that the Empire just goes along with it. The Empire literally doesn't care, but also the clone troopers are there that the Empire is using to assist the Trandoshans. However, it really also underlines the sudden reversal of fortune, the sudden betrayal of the Wookiees by the clones.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes,
that was one of the things that happened in Revenge of the Sith, is they're fighting side by side. Order 66 comes down, and all of a sudden the Wookiees are their enemies. And it's like, when did that happen? Right? Order 66 apparently wasn't just triggering kill all the Jedi. It was like, oh yeah, and the Wookiees, now they're slaves. What? You know, that sort of thing. And I think that that is the thing that I would have loved to spend more time with.
Sure. I mean, I
don't know how you go about that, though. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you could sort of have an enemy mine thing where one of the batch gets paired off with one of the regular service clone troopers and they have that sort of conversation, but this isn't really the arena for it. You know, it's one of those things where you lose focus in the episode then. So I think to go 2 episodes, it might have gotten a little too slow. So it's like, I think this is one of those ones where there's a lot of great stuff, maybe another 5 minutes. You know, if they'd said, let's do a longer episode, I probably would have been completely down with that. But it's just because there's so much stuff that I'd love to unpack.
I can totally see that. And, you know, I think what you were saying is 100% correct. And this is the genius, I think, of the team for the Bad Batch and just, you know, Star Wars animation from the Clone Wars to Tales of the Jedi and, of course, Rebels, is that they really did figure out this way to craft stories and always be asking the question, what do we need and what don't we need, you know? And I think this is an episode that clearly shows you just how good they are at editing the story to the point where you're getting everything you need in the episode and nothing that you don't. And that takes obviously a ton of skill to be able to pull off. And I think that the beauty then is you're in that place where you're kind of like, I am just kind of left wanting more. And that's a great place to leave the audience, you know, because then you have the ability, if it ever comes up later, to return there. And you have a reason to return there because you also know that fans would be interested in doing that as long as it is good for the story that you're telling. So, you know, I think that's the thing here that is always exciting to me because, again, I think this go back to your original question, building on the Clone Wars, right? Well, Gungi's an interesting character. The Wookiees themselves are interesting characters. You know, we knew, and if you've, you know, done any research, you know, Dave had talked about, you know, future episodes of the Clone Wars that if they had gone longer, they would have returned to Kashyyyk. And so there's some designs here that they would have used there as well. So everything, you know, George was always big on never throwing anything away because you never knew when you might use it. And the animation department is just continuing to live up to that Lucasian way of storytelling, which is if it doesn't work here, put it in the archives because we might pull that out and use it again. And I think that's the joy of, again, what we've been talking about, the kind of going around in circles, I guess, but it's so well done. Like I just, as we're talking about it, I'm just really appreciating how tight the storytelling is and the fact that instead of being left where I'm like, I don't really need to see that again, I'm more in the camp of, I want to see more of that.
It's more along the lines, in all honesty, of this is the reason that shows like this, and I know people cringe and they roll their eyes, but it's the reason shows like this that Filoni or some of the other long-term crew, this is why it, quote unquote, feels like Star Wars, because a discarded Star Wars idea from years ago is still a quote unquote Star Wars idea. It has that air of authenticity that it came out of that general wellspring. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be new Star Wars ideas that are valid, but especially when you're putting yourself in a time period where it is extremely vital. Like if you make a series, that's set 200 years before the Phantom Menace, I think you have a little more freedom to be a little weirder. But if you go, you have to have, you don't have to have, I'm sort of overstating, but you know what I'm saying here. It gives it that air of authenticity because it's an idea that would have worked in one of the stories we saw previously. Yeah. But instead it's being used here, and that's that tie. Now, in terms of ideas that come back is in episode 3, Kashyyyk didn't have a chance to shine for its reputed expanded universe trove of horrific monsters that lived on it. Right. Where basically we found out that Wookiees basically survived because they lived higher than other creatures, sort of thing. And you didn't go down into the jungle if you could help it. The spiders or spider scorpion thingies, whatever you want to call those horrific creatures that live in the webs. Very Lord of the Rings with, that sort of thing.
There's a lot of this story that's very Lord of the Rings.
But I got to ask you, would you be able to avoid shooting at them? Because when Gungi's like, no, it's cool, just don't threaten them. Would you be able to not threaten them?
The thing that I came away from this episode with was a few things, but specifically here, I think the beauty of this was, and it's one of the allusions to the Lord of the Rings, which is the elves, and the way in which the elves are so connected with nature, and they build their houses inside of the trees, right? And they build their houses, like in Rivendell, it's built in harmony with nature. And so what we see here is that you have the Wookiees who live in harmony with the world that they inhabit, right? They have this religion built around the trees, which, again, then also connects with the larger Star Wars mythos of that the Force binds the galaxy together, that it's in the rock, the tree, and so all of these things I think fit together so beautifully. And then on top of that, you're reminded then this is Omega's first experience, really, with the spiritual in this way.
Oh, yep, that's true.
And so there's that beautiful moment, at the end where, she and Gungi are touching the tree and having that moment of meditation. And it's just an incredible reminder that this is another thing that's been taken away from Omega. She has never been able to experience this whole other side of life. And it takes a Jedi to show that to her, right? Which is what the Jedi did for the rest of the clones, is to show them that there was a whole other side of life.
I like that basically that's a doorway, and it goes all the way back to the start of the episode when they encounter Gungi for the first time. It's really fascinating to watch. There's no questioning. There's no, Omega, we can't put ourselves on the line. The minute that they see a Jedi, these clones, they go back to their original programming, for lack of a better term. They immediately fall in line in terms of like, okay, we're working with the Jedi, because it's just it's a default setting that they have, because that's the way it was, they were raised to be, as it were. And I thought that was a really nice touch, but I actually want to get back to the robot mafia. It can go poorly for some people. Like when Mandalorian season 3 had sort of that robot subculture on Lizzo planet. I talked with people that they really rejected that. They really hated it. I did not hate it. I love it when Star Wars gets a little weird like that.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too.
Okay, but did you have the same sort of reaction here with our robot underworld sort of thing?
I mean, I didn't have a problem with it, mainly because, too, when you think about yeah, we've seen droids, right, that are bounty hunters with the IG series, and I think with Solo, with L3 kind of opening the door for our understanding of droids, and I mean, the thing about those droids and droids in general in Star Wars is they've always had big personalities. They've always felt like real characters. Even though, yes, they are tools, there's still something that makes them feel almost sentient, right? Nobody would argue, I don't think, that R2-D2 isn't a person. Like, he just feels like a person, right? And so does C-3PO for all of his frustrating tendencies. These characters
I'm tired
feel...
of your 3PO bashing, young man.
But they feel like characters, right? They feel like as legitimate of characters in this universe as anybody else. And so I don't have an issue with that. And I think that it does create a lot of fun for them to be able to play with it. And I don't think that they've ever really taken it so far where I think, if anything, I think L3 probably pushes the boundaries as far as I'd like to see them go. Otherwise, though, I enjoy when they have, droids as the bad guys or, droids as the good guys. Like, I mean, it comes back to me thinking of, K2 in Rogue One. What a great character, right? And when he gives his life for Cassian and Jin in that moment, it's one of the tear-inducing moments of that film. And so, and it's a droid, right? So, I mean, I just think that speaks to the power of really well-written characters, regardless of quote-unquote kind of who they are. As long as you write it well, I'm going to care about, I'm going to feel for them, and I'm going to empathize with them.
Well, I mean, for me, it's also an extension of the fact that it's like I'm willing to entertain that they're walking around lizard people that aren't just in the Earth government, but also you have like giant shaggy dogs literally going around and
this is not just an episode of V,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Look up the lizard people. But I think that the biggest thing with this episode is where I want to get sort of like a final thought from you is you have to flip a coin between a slightly lighter episode like Faster and a slightly more mythology-connected episode, because you got a Jedi in it, with Tribe. In terms of self-contained episodes, where are you falling on this season? Which one would edge the other out in terms of how you'd like to see these bottle episodes operate?
I mean, I think that most people will not be surprised to hear me say that an episode with a Jedi is going to win out. I love Jedi in general in Star Wars. They're I think probably my favorite part of the series. And so to have that in this episode is something that I loved. I also, though, will say that I do think it just kind of, it's whatever my mood is, and there are times where, you do just need something lighter. It's the reason why, am I going to turn on an episode of Parks and Rec, or am I going to turn on an episode of Game of Thrones or something, of that ilk, right? It's like, well, it just kind of depends on my mood. Sometimes I just need to laugh. I need something light and funny and silly and poignant all at the same time. And sometimes I want something like more intense. And so the beauty of, I think, what they do with these Star Wars animated series episodes is that they also give you the opportunity to have episodes of all different kinds to choose from. And I think that's really wise. You need the ups and downs in a season, the highs and the lows, the serious and the fun. And so, yeah, I probably would lean towards a Tribe, but again, I just might be in the mood for something a little bit sillier or more, this lighthearted. And so that could have a big impact on what I choose. So which way would you end up going with that?
I mean, I'm pretty much in the same camp. The one thing that makes Faster edge out for me is that it doesn't feel like there should have been a little bit more, which again, it's sort of like a bass-backwards way for me to compliment how much is in this episode. Mm-hmm. But also, I loved the racing droid from Faster. That character tickled me.
Yeah.
I loved him. And I don't have that here. Like, I don't walk away with a character. Like, even in Entombed, I get time with Fee, and that advances that as well. But I love seeing Jedi. So it's like there's no bad choice here. Like you're saying, mm-hmm. it all depends on mood. But my default setting puts me with Faster because it's really tight and it's really self-contained, and it has a new character, and not just the droid, but I forget the big mob boss guy that's threatening Sid. Mm-hmm. That guy's interesting too. Like I don't have somebody like that to hook onto in this. That's a main antagonist or side character that tickles my fancy the same way. Again, love the episode. I'm just talking about default settings. So mm-hmm. That's where I end up. But speaking of default settings, people have to be able to program in where else they can find you online. Jedi Master Rushing, where else can they find you?
Well, I can be found all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. Of course, here on the network, you'll find me doing a completed show with Dre Kaufman, as we talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series. Over on the TFM network, you'll find me on the 602 Club talking about all of the franchises that we love outside of Star Trek. You'll find me also doing The Orb, Warp 5, The Artificial Tango, and Saddle Up. And then that means after all of that, John, where can people find you?
Well, the real question is, the one place they will never find me is anywhere with weird spider scorpion creature thingies like on Kashyyyk, because that's not ending well. Either they're all dying or I'm dying. It's not going to be peaceful. But you can find me as Kessel Junkie, KESSELJUNKIE, or you can find me also here on the network, co-hosting a show called House Lights that I co-host with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser, where we talk about the films of different directors by different criteria to delight and amaze everybody as we discuss film. But speaking of delightful and amazing, there is actually some Wookiee Nog available for us back at the temple. So, Master Rushing, I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.